Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Today we have new amazing stories, so subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What the H did your coworker do to get fired immediately? Machining. I once had a coworker who used a lathe to scrape off a sizable stainless steel component. Instead of notifying the boss, they chose to bore out the center, replace it with a plug of the exact same size that they press fit in, and then machine over it to make it appear as if it were made from a single piece of material. Passes inspection and is delivered to the buyer. When the customer vacuum bakes it, the middle plug breaks. If that hadn't happened, the part eventually would have literally and figuratively blown up the customer's equipment. Government work, so there's years and years and millions of dollars invested into this customer's project. If the error hadn't been discovered when it was, our store would have had to close forever. Coworker was dismissed right away. I work as a tattoo artist, and I'd like to tell you two stories. Therefore, these two items concerning something that demanded rapid removals and the individuals in question losing their employment. We had a fresh apprentice who had been with us for perhaps 2 weeks at most. We had already taken the time to demonstrate him everything that was associated with the work that he did on a daily or weekly basis, so he was familiar with the responsibilities of the job. Before putting the metal tubes and piercing equipment that we stored in the clean room into the autoclave, the first time he attempted to clean them, he did it without wearing gloves. Before I caught him, he had gotten around 2 tubes cleansed of extra ink. I told him that whenever he works with any piece of equipment, he had to wear gloves since there's a ton of ash that can go wrong. Instead of just admitting his error, he grabbed the metal brush he had been using, started rubbing it on his hand hard as F, and then said, "Dude, that S is so rare, I don't know why you'd even worry about it." I stared at him blankly for about 10 seconds, and then I told him to grab all of his stuff, get the F out of there, and don't bother coming back. The second one was that we had a street tattoo artist coming in to complete their apprenticeship. Even though he was only going to be working a couple tattoos per month, he was still going to be responsible for cleaning and other typical apprenticeship duties. This was because we were going to let him continue to work with the clients he already had under our supervision, but he would not be allowed to work on anyone who walked into the shop, also known as walk-ins. Within the first month, I instructed him on how to produce his own shading ink and correctly store it so that he would not have to constantly mixing his color for each cap of shading ink he needed to pour. This spared him the trouble of having to do so. The next morning, when I arrived at the store early for an appointment, I discovered him standing over the sink we used to clean the metal tubes in, the one from the previous story, using the metal tube scrubber to remove leftover ink from an old plastic bottle of red ink. I responded with, "What the F are you doing? That's unsanitary. You need to throw that plastic bottle now." Again, rather than just admitting the error, he came to me with a straight face and stated, "What the customer doesn't know won't hurt him." My response was, "No, that's the exact type of ass that will hurt them very badly," and promptly told him to grab his ass, get out, and don't come back. Back in 2010, Weil Gotshal, one of the best law firms in the world, represented the debtors in the WAMU bankruptcy. My firm represented an investor that had filed a lawsuit on behalf of a class of warrant holders, alleging that the warrants created a debt obligation instead of equity. The case was all or nothing. If we were correct and it was debt, the class of holders got a decent recovery. If WAMU was correct and they were equity, the class got wiped out with nothing. Weil thought our argument was such a long shot, they gave the lead on the matter to a 14th year associate. For reference, partnership track is 8 to 10 years, so we're talking about an attorney that was still slogging through the 3,000 plus billable hours a year as an associate, trying desperately to finally make partner, but hadn't been successful. So he wasn't the best of the best, at Weil anyway. The governing document relating to the warrants was an old publicly filed warrant purchase agreement from a bank that was a predecessor to WAMU. Neither Weil nor we had signed the physical copy of the agreement because it was almost 20 years old, so we had to reference an old 8K that had a text file of a draft of the agreement appended to it. Wile's associate filed a motion to dismiss our lawsuit and asserted that the version appended to that 8K was the final version. We litigated for months on various issues relating to that motion, assuming that that was the pertinent document because Weil had represented under penalty of perjury that it was. On the day of the hearing, my client and I were reviewing the old Edgar docket and realized that there was a version of the agreement that had been publicly filed a few months after the one that Wile's associate claimed was the final version. It was buried as a text file as one of numerous exhibits to some seemingly unrelated document that didn't even reference the agreement. The two versions of the agreement were identical except for the signatures, the dates, and one word. May had been changed to shall in one of the operative provisions. The difference invalidated Wile's primary argument on its face. We walked into court and dropped the bombshell to the judge and everyone there. Essentially, Weil had spent months and hundreds of man-hours arguing over the wrong version of a document, and the right version meant we were sure to win. During the hearing, I looked over and saw the face of the associate. He was in shock. I don't think he believed what was happening. The judge ended up adjourning the hearing because of this newfound evidence, and we all took the train home. The next day, we got an email from a partner at Weil. He had taken over the case from the associate. When I saw the email, I checked Wile's website. The associate had already been fired. A month later, the judge issued the opinion denying the motion to dismiss, which was enough to increase the price of the warrants our client held for like 10 cents a share to somewhere in the $90 range. Our client immediately sold all of its warrants and we withdrew from the case. It ended up being one of the most high-profile victories in my career, to date anyway. What was your worst HOA experience and how did you handle it? I work in real estate and deal in foreclosed homes as my main job. I can tell you that HOAs are full of jerks who have too much free time. This one building I sold a unit in decided to redo the pool. The only problem was that some investors lived in the building and saw that the pool cost a lot more than it should have. There was a nasty campaign against the board, and people would leave flyers on doors telling people that they were probably going to get paid more because it was so expensive. I almost saw the head of the HOA and a member of the blue-haired rebels get into a fistfight. When police got in the way, it turned into a screaming match. The HOA gave up in the end. It was the same thing I saw in another house. They wanted to do some remodeling, so a huge special assessment was put down. Even though the improvements looked good, 80% of the facilities that people paid over $1,000 a month to use were shut down. Between the dues and the tax, the unit I was selling cost about $1,300 a month. If only one elevator worked, which one was it? I was in the elevator with the HOA president and another guy. When it turned out that the other guy was the head, he started getting crazy death glares. A neighbor of the most recent house I sold used their drone to fly around the neighborhood and check the roof shingles, which were meant to be uniform. Someone there sent me an email telling me that I needed my guys to come clean the roof with pressure. We need to sell it, so we'll do whatever it takes. They sign off saying it's all good, and then I get another email saying that there's more they want us to do after the fact, but I had my lawyer tell them to pound sand. The fence around another house was knocked over when Irma hit. It was in one piece, just on the ground. The way they behaved was just awful. Split the cost with the neighbor, and the fence got put up a few days later. One of my friend's dads was chosen as the head of his HOA and made these ridiculously strict rules. He said he was going to get all of these HOA rules from all over the country and add them to his own. His list of rules was longer than any college paper I ever got, and it was full of rules that didn't make sense. He was in charge of the HOA until everyone saw the whole list. About 3 or 4 days. FHOAs. My 3 friends and I chose to rent a townhouse to reside in while we were in college a few years ago. There can only be up to 4 unrelated persons residing in the residence according to the local HOA rules. It's great since we have 4 persons. Really cool. We had to go through the eviction process for the previous resident since he refused to leave when he was supposed to. He ultimately moved out after spending a month sleeping on friends' couches. We obviously started bringing our belongings in that day because we were so eager to move in. Since our schedules at school kept us all very busy, the majority of the time we spent at home was spent working on homework. Although occasionally we had friends over to hang out, we never had a party. After 10 o'clock, we were never loud at all. After a few months, we receive an email informing us that we will be evicted due to the presence of at least 6 people in our home. Since there had only been 4 of us residing there during our whole stay, we were perplexed. We called the HOA and inquired as to what they were discussing. They said that we had too many individuals living with us and that the HOA representative, or whatever it's called, who resided in our townhouses had supplied them convincing evidence to that effect. We reassured her that there were only 4 of us residing there and requested that she email us all the documentation that our neighborhood HOA representative, Steve, had forwarded to her. Every email Steve wrote her that evening was forwarded to us by her. It was so strange. There were literally thousands of photos, including shots of all of our friends entering and leaving our house, all of our cars and where they were parked, every license plate that had ever been connected to our home. The fact that the images began the afternoon we moved in there disturbed me the most. It's not like he didn't like what we did and started snapping photos to prove we were breaking some law. The first time I went to the house, he had a picture of me as soon as I got out of the car. We were frightened. We were just 4 20-year-old girls that had been having pictures taken of everything we did for months, and we had no idea. We called the police that night. They were also alarmed by the staggering quantity of images and details on every facet of our lives. They collected all of our data before going to Steve's townhouse. He attempted to act ignorant as he opened the door. The police demonstrated to him that they had received every piece of information he had supplied to the woman who had emailed us. In essence, he promised not to continue photographing us. In order to have it on file, in case he didn't stop, the police were happy that we had filed a police report. As soon as we left our front door, we were officially in the public, thus he was free to snap photos. As a result, they couldn't really bring any charges against him. A week or so later, while I was walking to school, I noticed Stalker Steve leaning against his townhouse and taking a photo of me. I rushed down to confront him, but like the coward that he is, he fled into his house and wouldn't answer the door when I knocked. I'm not sure when he last stopped shooting photos. The HOA representative visited our home 3 times that week and said she didn't notice any indications that there were an additional person or 2 residing there. When our year was up, we happily moved to a new place. The following year, Stalker Steve was expelled from both his townhouse and the HOA. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm guessing it was probably the same type of stuff because we met some of the girls that had lived there the year prior and they said he did similar things to them. Not mine, but my parents have lived in an HOA since the 80s in Southern California. For a long time, the HOA said that all front gates had to be made of wood, and they also said that the roof had to have fire-resistant wooden shingles. The problem is that fire-resistant wood shingles don't work the way they should, and since it's very dry here, they can catch fire quickly if they come in contact with coals from a nearby fire. They will burn them with higher temperatures and destroy the house. In the 1990s, my dad got into a big argument with the HOA over the roof's use of wooden shingles. As a scientist, he did a lot of study on it and told the HOA that they had to get rid of it so that people could put in ceramic roof tiles. The HOA fought back, and that was the end of it. By 2003, the Cedar Creek fire had spread through our neighborhood, and it wasn't a surprise that many houses, especially those with wooden shingles, burned down. Any other homes that didn't get wooden roofs but instead got ceramic tiles were able to stay standing. My parents were lucky in that they had a neighbor that snuck back in after evacuations were issued. They hosed down the roof while it was on fire, broke through the wooden fence to prevent it from spreading, etc. What my parents did to fix the house after the fire was over, they fixed the fence, the garage, and the roof. The next day, while they were getting ceramic shingles put on their roof, the HOA gave them a fine. When my dad got angry, he tore up the fine, called my older brother, he's a lawyer, and got everyone in the area to sign a petition to get rid of the rules that said wooden fencing and shingles had to be used. The HOA is back with a lien on my folks' house. The plan my dad and brother came up with is to sue the HOA. When they saw they had nothing to stand on, they took away the lien, but my dad wasn't done yet. He got voted in to become the new VP. He changed the rules completely and basically hobbled the HOA. But it was awful to grow up near an HOA. They disagree with everything you say. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.